AT 7:30 a.m., October 24th, 1944. The USS Essex's flight deck hummed with lethal tension, salt spray stinging deck crews as they scrambled to ready aircraft for the modern world's most cataclysmic naval battle. Commander David McCambell, 34, climbed into his F-6F-5 Hellcat, 25 confirmed kills to his name, leader of Air Group 15, no stranger to danger, but nothing could prepare him for the radar operator's desperate sprint, a crumpled report in hand that would rewrite naval aviation forever. The numbers were a death sentence on paper: 60 Japanese fighters and dive bombers barreling toward the American carrier task force, 400 miles across the Philippine Sea east of Leyte Gulf. Only 7 Hellcats on the Essex stood in their way. Naval doctrine demanded a 3-to-1 advantage for attackers. The Japanese held nearly 9-to-1 odds, a steel and fire tidal wave against a tiny American vanguard. McCambell knew the cost of every lost pilot. Air Group 15 had lost 11 men in 3 months, their names etched in his memory, their families' letters penned by his hand. Morrison shot down over Formosa, Caldwell killed in Manila, Harris missing after Taiwan raids. The U.S. fleet bled experienced pilots, the Japanese throwing every aircraft at the American advance. The Essex exposed. Task Group 38.3's combat air patrol stretched thin across 60 miles of open ocean. The alarm had blared in the ready room, the first crack of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, a 4-day, 400-mile battle across Philippine waters, igniting around him. Every available American plane was airborne, refueling, or armed for surface strikes. The 7 Hellcats were the last line of defense. As his plane captain strapped him in, McCambell glanced at his fuel gauge. Half full, no time to top off. The Japanese formation was 22 miles out, closing at 200 knots, 6 minutes until they reached the carrier's weapons range. His Hellcat was battle-loaded, 6.50 caliber Brownings, 400 rounds per gun, 2,400 total. The Pratt & Whitney R-2800 roared to life, 2,000 horsepower shaking the cockpit. He scanned the deck. 6 more spooling Hellcats, pilots with quiet resolve. Ensign Roy rushing at his side, Hayes, Johnson. 3 more pushed into launch position. 7 men, 60 enemies. A choice that would define his legacy and the fleet's fate. The tactical manual was unyielding. Never divide your fighters when outnumbered, but it was written for fleets with dozens of fighters, not a skeleton crew of 7. McCambell had 2 options: send all 7 against the full formation, a blunt attack that would be annihilated, or split his force, a rule-breaking gamble to stop the real threat. The 20 dive bombers at the Japanese core. 1 bomb through the Essex's deck would kill hundreds, cripple Pacific air operations for months, and hand the Japanese a war-altering victory. But the 40 Japanese fighters, Zeros and Oscars, were an impenetrable wall. Any Hellcat targeting the bombers first would be torn to shreds. The Japanese formation blipped on radar. 40 fighters in loose escort around 20 dive bombers, course locked on the carriers. McCambell decided in the time it took to yank out the wheel chocks, faster than reason. He pointed 5 pilots south, attacked the bombers. He tapped his chest to rushing. We take the fighters. 2 Hellcats against 40 Japanese aircraft. Madness, suicide, the only choice. McCambell released his brakes, throttled to the floor, and his Hellcat lifted into the humid Philippine morning, rushing 30 seconds behind. They climbed hard, 3,000 feet, 6,000, 10,000. The Japanese formation was 15 miles ahead, tiny specks against the water, 60 enemies that might as well have been an armada. McCambell armed his guns, checked fuel again. Half tanks, 90 minutes of flight if conservative. Conservatism was not an option. He nosed up to 20,000 feet, altitude that turned gravity into a weapon, altitude the low-speed, deadly Japanese fighters could not match. Rushing took position 500 yards back and right, a 2-plane element practiced dozens of times over the Solomons and Marianas. Leader and wingman, attack from above, speed to strike, speed to escape. McCambell knew the Zero's strengths: unrivaled low-speed maneuverability, faster climb below 14,000 feet, and its fatal flaw. The Hellcat was 2,000 pounds heavier, able to dive faster than any Japanese aircraft. Weight became velocity, Velocity became killing power, and McCambell was about to turn physics into a massacre. He rolled into a 60-degree dive, the airspeed indicator spiking, 300, 350, 400 knots. The Japanese formation swelled in his sights, Zeros swirling around dive bombers like sharks. He picked a straggler, the weakest link, the one the herd wouldn't miss until too late, centered the Zero at 800 yards, close to 400. The Japanese pilot never looked up. McCambell squeezed the trigger. 6.50 caliber bullets erupted, tracers arcing like red lightning. The Zero's right wing disintegrated, the fighter rolling, inverted, and spiraling into the ocean 4 miles below. First kill. 8 more to break the American single-mission record. McCambell pulled up hard, 4 G-forces slamming him into his seat, the Hellcat's wings groaning, but holding as he climbed back to 20,000 feet. Rushing was there. Thumbs up. He'd taken out a second Zero. 2 down. 58 to go. 30 seconds. That's all it took for the Japanese escort to unravel. Fighters scattered in panic, diving, climbing, spinning. Tactical cohesion gone in a blink. McCambell didn't hesitate. His second target, a Zero foolishly climbing to meet him. The Hellcats R-2800 dominated at high altitude. The Japanese pilot never stood a chance. McCambell dove, tracers finding their mark, the Zero exploding in an orange fireball, fuel and ammo cooking off in secondary blasts. No parachute. Second kill. A ruthless rhythm took hold. Dive, fire, climb, repeat. McCambell cut through the Japanese formation like a harvester through wheat, reflexes sharpened by months of combat, trigger finger steady. Third Zero at 7:52 a.m., fourth at 7:56 a.m. He glanced at his fuel gauge, stomach tightening. The needle plummeted faster than expected. Every climb burning gasoline, main tank down to a quarter. He switched to the auxiliary tank, a split-second lifeline. Rushing stayed lockstep, the young ensign flying smart, shorter bursts, ammo conservation, deadly hits, skill that would later earn him the Navy Cross. Fifth kill at 8:03 a.m., a Nakajima Kai 43 Oscar, an Army fighter with paper-thin armor, torn apart by sustained fire. The Japanese mixed Navy and Army aircraft now, a desperate move from a stretched force, and McCambell felt their falter. They fought not as a unit, but as scared pilots clinging to survival. He lost count of the attacks, the cockpit thick with cordite, even through his oxygen mask. His shoulder ached from unrelenting G-forces, sweat soaking his flight suit in the 20,000-foot cold, machine guns glowing hot. Sixth kill, seventh kill. The Japanese formation was no more, just scattered aircraft fleeing west to Luzon, their carrier attack abandoned. McCambell checked his ammo counter. Less than 400 rounds left. 2,000 fired in 30 minutes, every round aimed to kill. Rushing pulled alongside, hand signals sharp, tap guns, slash throat. Out of ammo, completely dry. 400 rounds per gun expended, his Hellcat a metal tube with wings. McCambell faced a new impossible choice, escort his defenseless wingman back to the Essex. The smart move, or keep fighting. Japanese fighters still lingered, still threatened the carriers, and he had just enough ammo for 2 more attacks. He looked at Rushing, pointed down at a cluster of Zeros, nodded. Rushing nodded back. No words needed. The young ensign knew the tactic. His presence alone would split Japanese attention, force them to track 2 threats instead of 1. A gunless Hellcat looked no different from a loaded one, until it was too late. For the Japanese, too late was coming fast. The 8th Zero was a veteran, and he saw them coming. McCambell spotted him first, an A6M climbing in a tight turn, movement smooth, deliberate. This was no rookie. This pilot knew the Zero's greatest strength, the turning dogfight, where its light frame outmatched the heavy Hellcat. He reversed his turn, heading straight for McCambell and Rushing, a classic Zero gambit, the head-on merge. The same move that downed dozens at Coral Sea, Midway, the Marianas Turkey Shoot. McCambell had seen it 100 times. He never took the bait. He rolled inverted, pulling hard, negative G-forces throwing him against his straps, blood rushing to his head, vision narrowing to a tunnel. A risky move relying on muscle memory and nerve, but it worked. He completed the roll, emerging directly behind the Zero. Perfect position, perfect deflection shot, 300 yards out. McCambell squeezed the trigger, a shorter burst to conserve his last rounds. 50 bullets max. Tracers shattered the canopy, plexiglass and aluminum flying, the pilot slumping dead over the controls. The Zero snap-rolled left, falling to the ocean. No fire, no explosion, just gravity for a dead man. 8th kill. One more, just one more to break the American record. One more to make history. But McCambell's Hellcat was failing. He climbed back to 20,000 feet, the fighter sluggish, engine rough, a low rattle vibrating the cockpit. The cylinder head temp spiked red. He'd run the R2800 at full throttle for 40 minutes, pushing it far beyond its carrier design limits. Launch, fight, land. Never 90 minutes of high-altitude tropical combat. It was a miracle it hadn't quit. McCambell scanned the sky, spotting his 9th target at 8:40 a.m. A lone Zero, fleeing west to Luzon, pilot clearly broken by the American ace who'd torn his formation apart. This was the final dive. McCambell nosed over, the Hellcat accelerating as it plummeted. The Japanese pilot saw him and dove away. A fatal mistake. The Hellcat outdived every Japanese aircraft ever built, and McCambell closed fast. 300, 250, 200 yards. He locked the pipper on the Zero's engine cowling and fired his last extended burst. His final bullets. Tracers tore into the engine, which seized with a metallic shriek. Black smoke billowing from the cowling. The Zero nosed into a vertical dive, disappearing into an 8,000-foot overcast. Gone, but McCambell knew it was a kill. 9th kill. 9 Japanese aircraft destroyed in 90 minutes. The American single-mission record. A mark no Navy pilot would ever match. For the first time since takeoff, McCambell keyed his radio, voice hoarse from oxygen and adrenaline. Essex, Air Group 15 lead, 9 confirmed kills. Over. Silence. Then the operator's stunned reply. Air Group 15 lead, say again. Confirmed kills. 9 confirmed. Over. McCambell set the radio to standby and checked his fuel gauge, and his blood turned cold. Main tank, empty. Auxiliary tank, 1/8 full, 20 gallons at most. Throttle to minimum cruise, maybe 30 minutes of flight. He looked around, heart sinking. He chased the Japanese 100 miles from the task force. 100 miles back to the Essex. 30 minutes of fuel. The math didn't add up. Rushing pulled alongside, shaking his head, pointing at his gauge. Empty. His Hellcat ran on fumes, a thin white vapor trailing the engine. Oil temp spiking red. Both fighters were dying, engines worn to breaking by 90 minutes of non-stop combat. Full throttle climbs, hard dives. The R2800 was a workhorse, not indestructible. McCambell throttled back to 1,800 RPM, the Hellcat shuddering, engine coughing but airborne. He turned east, beginning a slow glide to safety, altitude his only ally. Height was potential energy, tradable for distance when the engine quit. Every 1,000 feet equals 2 miles of glide. He was at 18,000 feet, 36 miles if lucky. The Philippine coast fell away, open ocean ahead, cold water that killed in 30 minutes. McCambell had no intention of testing it. He adjusted the fuel mixture to full lean, watching the needle hit empty. The engine coughed twice, then smoothed out, running on vapor and hope. The American fleet appeared an hour later, tiny gray shapes 60 miles away. Too far. The engine coughed at 50 miles out, sharp and ragged. McCambell flipped the fuel selector, checked the gauge. Nothing. Both tanks, zero. The R2800 ran on residual line fuel, vapor keeping the prop spinning, but the engine note turned rough, missing cylinders. The Hellcat was dying. So was Rushing's. McCambell passed 10,000 feet, 40 miles from the Essex, and saw the task force clearly. 4 carriers in a box, cruisers and destroyers forming a protective screen, white wakes cutting the blue water. He descended faster, trading altitude for distance. 8,000, 7,000 feet, every foot a gamble. At 6,000 feet, An explosion rocked the air 200 yards ahead. A black smoke puff, a 5-inch shell from an American destroyer. Proximity fuse. Friendly fire. McCambell's stomach dropped. The destroyer screen spotted 2 aircraft approaching from the west, Japanese Luzon's direction, and shot first. The IFF transponder should have signaled friendly, but 1944 IFF was notoriously unreliable. Malfunctions, dead batteries, human error. Another shell burst 100 yards out, then another. Destroyers firing a full barrage. Flak filling the sky. McCambell pushed the stick forward, diving for the wave tops, rushing right behind. Both Hellcats dropped 3,000 feet in 30 seconds. The 5-inch fire stopped, but McCambell knew what came next. Off-site panic, a call for the combat air patrol. 4 Hellcats appeared at 2,000 feet, diving fast, VF-19 from the Lexington, American fighters, gun ports open, attack formation locked. McCambell had no way to identify himself. Radio set to Essex's frequency, hands glued to the stick to keep his dying Hellcat airborne. The 4 fighters closed, 1,800, 600 yards. He saw their pippers locked on his fuselage. The lead fighter lined up for the shot. McCambell's engine coughed constantly now, sputtering on the brink of death. He was 3 miles from the Essex. So close he saw aircraft on the deck. So close he tasted safety. But the 4 Hellcats closed. 400, 300 yards. McCambell tensed, ready for the .50 caliber impact. Ready for the end. Then the lead fighter broke off. No radio call, no explanation, just a sharp turn, climbing away. The other 3 followed. Rushing's pursuers did the same. The friendly fire incident ended as suddenly as it began. Maybe the pilot saw Air Group 15's markings. Maybe the Essex radioed the patrol. Maybe pure luck, the same luck that carried him through 2 against 40. Whatever it was, it saved their lives. McCambell's engine quit at 2 miles from the Essex. Complete power loss. The prop windmilled in the slipstream, the Hellcat a glider now. Airspeed, 120 knots. Sink rate, 800 feet per minute. Altitude, 1,000 feet. He did the math in an instant. He'd hit the water 1 mile short of the carrier. He was going to die, inches from safety. Then he saw the USS Langley, CVL-27, a light carrier smaller than the Essex. But her deck was clear. No launches, no landings. A single desperate chance. McCambell turned toward her. A dead stick landing. No power, no throttle, no second chances. The Langley steamed into the wind. Standard procedure, giving him a few extra knots of airspeed over the deck. Maybe enough. Maybe not. He was 800 feet high, 1 mile out, sink rate climbing, 700, 600 feet. He dropped the landing gear. Hydraulics still worked, gravity and residual pressure locking it down with a solid thump. He reached for the flap handle, then froze. Flaps would increase drag, steepen his glide. He needed every foot of altitude to reach the deck. Gear down, flaps up. No turning back. Committed. The Langley swelled in the windshield. McCambell's eyes locked on the deck, hands steady. He saw the landing signal officer on the port side. Yellow paddles frantic, giving the cut signal. Too high, too fast, wrong angle. McCambell ignored him. He had no power to adjust. Physics flew the plane now. Gravity, momentum, the last of his airspeed. 500 feet, half a mile out. He was going to make it, barely. The Hellcat crossed the Langley's stern at 50 feet, the LSO diving into the safety net as the landing gear cleared the deck edge by inches. The fighter slammed down, oleos compressing fully, the tail hook catching the number 3 wire. Perfect. The wire stretched, the Hellcat decelerating from 90 knots to 0 in 3 seconds. 8 G-forces slamming McCambell forward, his head snapping against the headrest. The engine died the second the hook caught. Complete fuel starvation. It was over. He was alive. The Langley's deck crew swarmed McCambell's Hellcat the second it stopped, moving fast to unhook the arresting wire, standard procedure to clear the landing area. But the tail hook was locked fast, hydraulics dead, engine pump non-functional. 4 sailors grabbed it, lifting and pulling with all their strength. manually disengaging it as McCambell sat in the cockpit, staring at the zeroed fuel gauge. His hands shook from adrenaline. His body ached from 90 minutes of combat. 30 seconds later, Rushing's Hellcat slammed down, catching the number 2 wire, his engine quitting on rollout. 2 dead Hellcats on the Langley's deck. 2 pilots alive. 2 miracles. McCambell climbed out, legs nearly buckling, salt spray stinging his face. The crew's cheers a distant hum. Fatigue hit him like a truck. A deck officer catching him by the arm, clipboard in hand for the debrief. McCambell gave the numbers, voice hoarse. 9 confirmed kills, 1 probable, 6 formation attacks, ammo and fuel expended. The officer wrote it down, pen pausing at 9, then told him to wait. An ordnance chief climbed the Hellcat, counting remaining rounds, port and starboard. He climbed down, eyes wide. 2 rounds left, total. 2,400 rounds loaded that morning. 2,398 fired. 99.9% of his ammo, every bullet used to kill or disable. The chief had 3 years of carrier duty, Guadalcanal, Marianas, countless missions, and he'd never seen anything like it. A fuel crew checked the tanks, lowering a calibrated stick. Main, auxiliary, reserve, all bone dry. The engine had run on vapor for the last 5 minutes, fuel for 10 more minutes at most. If he'd aimed for the Essex, he'd have crashed 3/4 of a mile short, dead in the cold Philippine water. The deck officer stared at him, awe and shock mixing on his face. 9 kills, 2 rounds left, 0 fuel, a dead stick landing on a foreign carrier, friendly fire evaded. He'd seen hundreds of pilots land after combat, wounded, exhausted, victorious, but none like David McCambell. McCambell's first question, the 5 pilots he'd sent after the dive bombers. The officer checked his status board, smiling. All 5 back safe on the Essex, 2 confirmed kills, 3 probables, no American aircraft lost. The Japanese strike was broken before a single bomber reached the carriers. No bombs, no torpedoes, task group 38.3 intact. McCambell nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders. His gamble had paid off. The carriers were safe. His men were alive. That was the real victory. Not the record, not the kills. The men. He walked to the Langley's Island, staring east at the Essex, 4 miles away. Flight operations continued unbroken. Hellcats launching for patrol, dive bombers returning from surface strikes. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was just beginning. October 24th was day 1 of 4, spanning 4 engagements: Sibuyan Sea, Surigao Strait, Cape Engano, Samar. 200,000 naval personnel involved, the Imperial Japanese Navy throwing everything at the Leyte invasion, Operation Shogo, their victory operation, their last chance to stop the Allied advance on Japan. McCambell's 9 kills had disrupted the morning strike, but the Japanese weren't finished. Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi commanded hundreds of land-based aircraft on Luzon, Zeros, Vals, Kates, Bettys, and he'd launched 2 more waves before sunset, 50 to 60 aircraft each. The American carriers would be under attack for 3 straight days. A medical corpsman approached, a standard post-combat check. Pulse, blood pressure, hypoxia, and decompression tests. No physical injuries, just shaking hands, an adrenaline crash. Normal after 90 minutes of sustained combat. He handed McCambell a cup of scalding black coffee, which he drank in 1 gulp, the heat jolting him awake. The deck officer returned with a message from the Essex. Return immediately for debrief, a destroyer would transfer him. McCambell found Rushing sitting on his Hellcat's wing, staring at the ocean. 24 years old, an ensign with 6 kills, 15 total between them. More than most squadrons achieved in a month. Rushing would get the Navy Cross, the nation's 2nd highest valor award. McCambell clapped him on the shoulder, a silent thank you for the best wingman a pilot could ask for. A whaleboat took him to a destroyer, the 20-minute transfer rough with 3-foot swells. The crew timed their approach to the Essex's boarding ladder carefully, McCambell climbing 30 feet to the main deck, hands raw from the metal rungs. An officer waited. Commander Air Group 15, Intelligence Center, immediately. The Intelligence Center was deep in the Essex's hull, windowless, maps covering every wall. Leyte Gulf was tracked in real time. Red for Japanese, blue for American. Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force steamed through the Sibuyan Sea. 5 battleships, including the massive Yamato and Musashi, 12 cruisers, 15 destroyers, heading for the San Bernardino Strait. Breakthrough, and they'd slaughter the Leyte landing troops. American carrier aircraft had attacked all morning. The Essex's bombers hitting the Musashi repeatedly. She slowed, listed, but still floated, still dangerous. 72,000 tons, 16-inch belt armor, 9-inch deck armor, the largest battleship ever built, able to withstand unthinkable punishment. The Japanese Southern Force approached Surigao Strait. 2 battleships, 4 cruisers, 8 destroyers. Admiral Jesse Oldendorf's battle line waited. 7 battleships, 8 cruisers, 28 destroyers. A classic ship v ship fight. The last major battleship engagement in history. The greatest threat, the Northern Force, 4 carriers steaming south from Japan. Admiral William Halsey took the fast carrier task force north to intercept. Most American air power leaving Leyte, letting Kurita's center force risk an unopposed breakthrough. An intelligence officer briefed him. The Essex would launch a maximum effort strike against the center force at 1400 hours. McCambell would lead the fighter escort. His original Hellcat was stranded on the Langley, so he'd fly a replacement F-6F-5, aircraft 47, prepped and ready. He had 90 minutes to rest, eat, brief his pilots, 90 minutes to recover before leading another strike against the Japanese fleet's most heavily defended targets. He went to the Air Group 15 ready room. 23 pilots gathered for the briefing. Some fresh, some from morning patrol, some from the Sibuyan Sea strikes. Lieutenant Commander Rigg, torpedo squadron leader, reported 8 confirmed hits on the Musashi she took on water, but still steamed for San Bernardino. The pilots looked at McCambell differently now. Word of the 9 kills had spread, the radio transmissions heard by all. The sight of him and Rushing landing on the Langley with dead engines seared in their minds. Fighter pilots respected kills, but they revered survival. Coming back from 2 against 40 earned legend, not just respect. McCambell had flown combat for 7 months since April 1944, when the Essex joined Task Force 58 for the Marshall Islands strikes. Air Group 15 had fought over Truk, Saipan, Guam, Tinian, Palau, Formosa, the Philippines. 6 months of continuous combat, 20,000 plus flight hours, 315 enemy aircraft destroyed in the air, 348 on the ground, more than any other Pacific Air Group. McCambell had 25 kills before that morning, his previous best 7 in one day during the June Marianas turkey shoot. 5 Judies in 1 sortie, 2 zeros over Guam, an ace in a day. The only American pilot to do it twice. Now 9 kills in 90 minutes, a record that would stand for the rest of the war. The closest any pilot came, Lieutenant Cecil Harris, 7 kills over Formosa. McCambell's 9 kills were the peak of what one pilot could achieve. Perfect altitude, target-rich skies, flawless ammo and fuel management, and luck. But luck only went so far. The rest was training, tactics, courage, years of flying, hours of practice, split-second decisions when everything was on the line. The 1400 launch came fast. McCambell climbed into Hellcat 47, the seat warm from morning patrol, the familiar routine of strapping in, calming his nerves. The Essex's deck was organized chaos. Handlers positioning planes, ordnance crews loading 500-pound bombs on Helldivers, Mark 13 torpedoes on Avengers, temperamental weapons, needing a 100-foot, 110-knot drop to avoid tumbling and sinking. McCambell's Hellcat rolled down the deck at 1,355 hours, lifting into the afternoon sky, 11 fighters, then dive bombers, then torpedo planes following, 36 aircraft forming up, turning west to the Sibuyan Sea, to the Musashi and Yamato, to the thickest flak in the Imperial Japanese Navy. The afternoon strike was brutal. McCambell led strafing runs against the destroyer screen, suppressing 40mm flak, forcing gun crews to take cover while the bombers attacked. The sky blazed with black flak puffs, every second a gamble. The Musashi took 19 torpedo and 17 bomb hits that afternoon, finally capsizing and sinking at 1930 hours. 2,300 crew went down with her, the largest warship ever sunk by aircraft. McCambell landed back on the Essex at 1,700 hours exhausted, but unharmed, flying 2 more combat missions over the next 2 days as Leyte Gulf raged. When the battle ended on October 27th, the Imperial Japanese Navy was broken. 4 carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, 11 destroyers lost, 26 warships, 300,000 tons. They were finished as an effective fighting force, their last chance to stop the Allies gone. The road to Japan was open. David McCambell flew his last combat mission on November 14, 1944. Air Group 15 returned to the U.S. for rest and refit. By the war's end, he had 212 combat missions, 34 confirmed kills, 21 aircraft destroyed on the ground, the U.S. Navy's top ace, the ace of aces, the only fast carrier pilot to win the Medal of Honor for aerial combat. President Franklin D. Roosevelt presented it to him in January 1945, the citation honoring his 7 kills at the Philippine Sea, 9 at Leyte Gulf, fighting desperately but with superb skill against overwhelming air power. His actions disorganizing the enemy and forcing them to abandon their attack before a single aircraft reached the fleet. McCambell survived the war, staying in the Navy, retiring as a captain in 1964 after 31 years of service. He lived quietly in Florida, giving occasional interviews, speaking at naval aviation events. Never a hero, just a pilot who did his job. He died on June 30th, 1996, at 86, buried at Arlington National Cemetery. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, USS McCambell, was commissioned in his honor in 2002. His October 24 Hellcat, Buno 70,143, sits in Pensacola's National Naval Aviation Museum, preserved as it was that morning. Navy blue, white stars, 34 Japanese flags on the fuselage, a testament to courage, skill, and impossible victory. 2 Hellcats against 60 Japanese fighters, 9 kills in 90 minutes, 2 rounds left, 0 fuel, a dead stick landing on a foreign carrier, an American record that stands 80 years later. Commander David McCambell proved what one pilot could do when everything was on the line, when a fleet's fate, a war's outcome, rested in his hands. He didn't just rewrite naval aviation history, he defined it. A Pacific legend, a hero never to be forgotten.